Chapter 4706. If the little emperor dies in this siege, then the promise between the two of them will be countless, and he will be alone, looking for everything hidden behind the mist. Various thoughts flooded into my heart. Jian Wushuang did not make any statement. At this moment, all the top repairs in this day's city had already escaped. The vast city was so dead that there was only breathing. Nearly 1,000 body shapes came from all directions, with a sense of killing in prudence. The strength of the mutual connection turned into the strongest prison cage, covering the entire sky city. The little emperor was very calm, standing in the same place. His hands were fast, and he was correcting the dress of the luxury, and then tightened the jade belt around his waist, and pulled out a slender soft sword. This was the first time Jian Wushuang saw him shot, a unique and lonely breath surging. Immediately thereafter, Xiaodijun lifted the soft sword in his hand and did not hesitate to cut off the long hair from his back to his waist. All the half-steps with no trace of body shape, the eyes with Sen Lung's indecision still unabated. It's your intention to let you know the whereabouts of this seat, but if you want this life, see if you have that qualification. The little emperor's eyes slowly swept over everyone, and the long hair cut in his hand fell to the ground. The silent death battle begins quietly. With a sword out, the supremacy is like a thundering dragon rushing towards the nearest black robe. Some of the weaker ones were strangled on the spot by the sword spirit that Yanli transformed into. Holding the slender soft sword, the little emperor entered the unmanned state, and at the same time as the sword was cut out, another palm came out. But it was just a few minutes, and dozens of ancestors fell into his hands. But when the nearly 15 Yangxian surrounded them, the little emperor who had the upper hand immediately fell off. At most, he is the peak of Yangxian. How can he resist the 15 tricks of Yangxian who are also Yangxian? With one finger, the waist and abdomen were centered, and the little emperor stepped back half a step, and a flush of red appeared on both sides of the cheek. The extravagant clothes were torn and there was a trace of blood overflowing. At the same time, 15 Yangxian, 15 Dainyan forces combined, shot at the little emperor. At this moment of life and death, Jian Wushuang shot, including the palm of the surging sword, directly past him and faced forward. The polar day flashed over, and the layers of shock waves made the ancestors unable to act in the blasted center. Take one enemy 15. Jian Wu took a step back without double weight, completely offsetting the 15 Yangxian's combined efforts. The little emperor's eyes widened, and he looked at him with some meaning. I don't want to die. I try my best to kill here. Jian Wushuang did not look back, his voice low. The little emperor heard the words and smiled slightly. Understand. 15 Yangxian who were also repelled glanced at each other, and ran forward again, encircling the three with a more violent yang force than before. Jian Wushuang apparently did not want to fight a protracted battle. In order to cause more extensive damage in the first time, he directly released the ancestral power world gate. The sky-covering giant finger broke through the cage barrier on the sky dome, like thousands of suns falling. All black robe people feel a strong sense of crisis and try to avoid it. However, when the Chuanjie Tian Men was completely released, there were hundreds of ancestors who tried to resist, and they died on the spot and turned into powder. Even the pavilions in the Sky City are under this style, and a gap has been wiped out. With the dissipation of the Tianmen Gate of the Power Realm, a more majestic horror kendo pours out, turning into a long sword of kendo. Some ancestors died on the spot, and even a black robe Yangxian was accidentally cut off half of the body. The little emperor is located on the side of Jian Wushuang's body, and in the extravagant clothes, he easily grabs any ancestor who comes forward. 3 pairs of thousands, this is impossible and crazy. Although the ancestors can't do much damage to Jian Wushuang and Xiaodijun, but with their attracted damage, the 15 Yangxian still caused great trouble to the two. A sword lured the first immortal who approached first. Jian Wushuang directly released the vast sword, and barely separated them. At the same time, more than 10 purple robes rushed to death from a distance. Little Emperor, the big companion is late. The thin and small Zipao directly swung his arms away from the ancestors, blocking him in front of him. Not late, just came. Xiaodijun smiled, and rush out with me. At the end of the speech, the vigorous force rose up and swept across the field. Spring and autumn are struggling to support, But he is an ancestor. Without the protection of Jian Wushuang, I am afraid that he would have been strangled as a fan. Unwilling to be reconciled to this, he reached out and took out the 8-arm colored pottery previously given to him by Jian Wushuang. The 8-armed colored pottery rose in the hands of spring and autumn in the hands of the storm, but in an instant, it grew into a shocking 8-armed arrogant Luohan. It's done. Chuanqiu smiled excitedly, and he didn't dare to underestimate the terrifying strength of his 8-armed anger. The full-formed 8-armed anger is almost at the same level as the whirling ancestor of the whirling sky. For some reason, the whirling ancestor was far beyond the peak of Yangxian, and reached a more profound state. And this 8-armed angry eyes has naturally exceeded the peak of Yangxian, and has reached a certain unknown level. Looking at this almost ugly figure, all black-robed people stopped subconsciously for a moment. It was at this moment that a total of 8 black gold palms fell towards the ground with an unstoppable momentum. Boom! Because Yangxian was unable to dodge, the source was crushed on the spot, and the ancestors even disappeared, turning into a layer of nourishment and absorbed by the 8 arms. Brother Jian, let's go. Chuanqiu turned around and screamed angrily. It would be too late to go again. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, reached out to call out Tianmen's ulterior motives, striving for an opportunity to escape. The giant palm covering the sky, which was made up of thousands of gods and soldiers, descended from the heavenly gate and fell to the ground in a covering manner. A group of Yangxian who had already known its power directly dispersed in a tacit manner, and their bodies rushed in all directions, blocking the retreat of several people in due course. The huamang subsided, and there are still thousands of black robes in the shape of the deep sea, which makes people breathless. One of the black robe Yangxian took a step forward, pointed to the little emperor, and then said, "Leave him behind, any of you can leave this place, I will never stop." Chuanqiu looked at Jian Wushuang, with some urgency in his eyes. For him, it was obviously very good to be able to see the death of the enemy by siege. But without waiting for the sword Wushuang to open, the thin purple robe took the first step and slowly pulled down the hood on his head, revealing an old cheek covered with scars of the gully. At this level, even your master can't help it, let alone all of you. Chapter 4707. The black robe Yangxian's eyes narrowed, and the murderous intention revealed. "Old fellow, you will definitely die today. If you are brave enough, just come and take it. Although the old man's strength is declining, but crushing you is just like crushing a group of bedbugs." Without speaking again, there were 12 Yangxian left. At this moment, all of them were dispatched, and all the terrifying yanqi, which was enough to control one side of the heaven, was poured over. Jian Wushuang frowned. With his current strength, crushing the ordinary 3 or 5 Yangxian is not a problem, but now there are 12 Yangxian joint shots. Unless the 3 emperors are called out, they have a count one, no one can escape. But the 3 emperors are now his last life-saving cards, and in this eerie wave of Dian at the last moment of life-threatening, Jian Wushuang will never show anyone. He is confident that he can escape even if surrounded by so many Yangxian, but Xiao Dijun and others may never escape. With all his palms, the more vigorous force directly forced the nearly 100 ancestors in front of him, headed by Jian Wushuang, and began to flee to the gateway to the heavenly city. Chuanqiu also evoked an 8-armed rage at this time. Under each wave of repression, there were several ancestors who could not dodge it. At this moment, the little emperor, a pair of cold eyes like blood dripping, and his pallid, bruised face turned red. The large number of people in this siege and the high level of it are obviously really running to kill him. A dead fight is inevitable, but his end seems destined. Along with a dark purple horror force rising, the thin black robe hunted around the purple robe. Between his palms, countless purple mansions connected to each other, turning into a longest straight knife. One of the most common straight swaying waves made the earth instantly cracked, and a tremendous stilt burst out with a breath of destruction, bursting out of those top repairs. There is no sound, even with every death of the top repair, no one made a sound, and some are just the tragic situation of fighting. This is a team with clear goals and strict discipline. It is hard to imagine even Jian Wushuang, who can have such a great energy, organized such a team led by nearly 20 Yangxian, over 1,000 ancestors team. Is it an emperor? There is no answer. The sword Wushuang at the moment is like a ranger swordsman without emotions. Every time the invisible long sword is swung in his hand, he easily harvests several ancestral lives. And after having an 8-armed glare, chunkier strength sword, barely able to wander in the encirclement. As for the little emperor, as his face became more red, his strength decreased at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. If it were not for the protection of the thin purple robe, he might have already died in the surrounding circle. The 12 Yangxian, all surrounding the little emperor at this moment, apparently ran as long as he lived alone. Jian Wushuang, not far away, looked back subconsciously at the most previous paving. The mysterious guardian of the extreme did not know when it had disappeared, and no trace of it was left. With his hand, he quickly rubbed the day pattern bone armor, and Jian Wushuang quickly inserted it into the Bolyang bottle. At the same time, the voice of the tall and thin old man passed into his ears from the bowl of yang. "Little friend, but what trouble are you having?" I waited to feel that the outside world was not weak. Jian Wushuang heard the words and used his consciousness as a voice to pass into the bottle. "There is no major problem for the time being. I am confident that I can leave this place." The 3 emperors heard the words, and after a reply, everything was calm again. The Sky City in the Chuan Tianyu began to collapse in a large area. Such a terrible battle has already recruited law enforcement in this heaven. Nearly 100 strong physiques in embroidered robes came from all directions. As the first middle-aged man in Yangxian realm galloped forward, he was stopped by dozens of ancestors. One of the ancestors faintly showed a golden seal. Ern said, "Idler's retreat." The middle-aged man's gaze was calm first, and then there was no sign of a violent murderous attack. A beam of diffusive force slammed into the front, directly smashing the ancestor level into powder. "Idler's retreat. I came here today to ask for your life." Shun Shun's voice fell, and hundreds of embroidered robes soared into the sky, suddenly joined the battle. A total of 5 Yangxian. When they joined the battle, the pressure on everyone was relaxed. "Little Emperor, Chen Qing is late, and he hopes to forgive sins." The middle-aged man held a fairy-like sword around his sword, tearing it apart, and came to the front of Little Emperor. The Little Emperor smiled miserably. "Okay, it's not too late. This Jingchuan is so big, only you will come to save me." A sword flies to several ancestors. Chen Qing also looks dignified. They may have a bitter feeling. Without speaking again, Xiaodijun looked not far away. He was struggling to encircle the sword Wushuang, who had torn open a mouth. He, who had been silent for a while, seemed to have made a choice in his heart, but did not choose to leave. With a fierce rush from the bottom of my heart, Xiaodijun's frowned brows suddenly sharpened. Looking at the top repairers who were like the sea, he smiled somberly, his palms quietly surging a dark purple flame. A realm of dark color spreads around him, and every inch of the earth swallowed quickly and madly. Innumerable pavilions have turned into powder in this eccentric field, while the rest of the black robes in this field have been repaired, only to feel the darkness in front of them. Seeing this scene, the thin purple robe covered with blood was a pity in his eyes. In his own field, the little emperor seems to have returned to its original appearance, and the state of a peak of Yangxian still seems to be climbing. Jian Wushuang's eyes were real, and his eyes were fixed. He could feel that the realm of the little emperor seemed to break through the layer of shackles in the middle of the world, and reached another unbelievable point. The long hair truncated to the shoulders is dancing in the wind, and the golden and silver lines depict the luxury hunting of the mountains and rivers. With a lightly pointed point, the space would be shattered, and the nearest Yangxian, who hadn't even reacted yet, suddenly shrunk into a massive chest, and then even with the body's origins vanished. One finger kill. Therefore, people have their eyes widened, and it is unbelievable. With just one finger, a Yangxian will disappear. How terrible will this be? Chuanqiu, don't look away. He thought back to the past. In the old days, the old man who had been serving him, as in this scene, was smashed into the fairy source, and he died together with the heaven. With the one finger killing Yangxian, the little emperor Jun Sen cold eyes stared at all the top repairs in front of him. Chapter 4708. Another finger out, a Yangxian in the same way, will be destroyed by the body fairy source. Of the 12 Yangxian, only 10 are left at the moment, and there are more than 800 ancestors at the same time. Looking at him so easily, he killed a Yangxian. Rao Shijian Wushuang secretly shocked, to know that even he himself can never be so freehand. Standing in his own field, the little emperor is like an undoubted master, taking away dozens of black robe ancestors with each wave. The thin purple robe, Chen Qing and others also reacted and started to fight back. After Jian Wushuang looked back, he continued to break open. The stolen cold, more than 10 Yangxian, only 8 left now. Eventually, a black robe Yangxian reacted, and took a difficult thing out of his arms, and then nailed hard to the ground. It was a slap-sized flag. With the fall of this first flag, all black robe top repairers took the same flag from their arms and threw it out. There are nearly 100 flags with strange energy, and when they fall into the air, they directly link with each other to form a large formation and directly suppress them. The skinny purple robe changed dramatically, and he wanted to reach out and grab the flag, but he was a little late. The flag was like a burst of sight, and once the imposing blockade landed on the ground, it instantly broke the domain of the little emperor, like a big clock, and hugged it firmly in it. It seemed that he had suffered a bite, and the little emperor suddenly burst out a ray of yin-red blood, and a terrifying dynamism languished at a rate visible to the naked eye. Chen Qing looked terrified, and the long sword lingering in his hand was stabbed at the magic circle. However, the invincible sword edge lost its previous role this time. Even the magic circle had not been shaken at all. Master. The thin purple robe rushed forward, and because of the rush of fire, even if he vomited a sigh of blood. The black robe Yangxian, who gradually wrapped several people in it, after seeing this scene at the moment, instead stopped and looked at them playfully. This formation, specially designed for the little emperor, once trapped, even without the need for others to work, the body fairy source will be automatically destroyed and dissolved. There is no possibility of survival. He and Chen Qing alone could not break through the large array like a deep prison, and the thin purple robe had red eyes. It was completely crazy to desperately urge the force to destroy this array. The little emperor seems to have expected his own ending, but instead sits calmly and wipes the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looks at the thin purple robe and smiles. Large companion, leave it as far as possible. If Jian Wushuang is willing to take you, then follow him. The thin purple robe shook his head. He seemed to realize something, and suddenly turned back to look at Jian Wushuang, who was not far away. Then he knelt down on one knee. Please save the little emperor. All Yangxian's face changed slightly after hearing the words, and after glancing at Jian Wushuang, in order to prevent the late changes, they started again. The figure flew into formation, and nearly 10 terrors were intertwined, striving to take away the life of the little emperor. With a deep sigh in his heart, Jian Wushuang finally took a step forward, and his unparalleled strength surging out swayed away the whole body in an instant. A kind of black robe ancestor who wanted to stop, was surprised to find that they couldn't make it. Chuanqiu followed behind him, using his 8 arms to furiously block some attacks. A magnificent river constructed entirely of swords is like a tianhe rewinding, sweeping forward with the finger of Jian Wushuang. The real Chen Qing's eyes that he saw opened to the maximum. He also entered the Dao with a sword. How can he not understand the horror of this sword like a huge ocean? Even if he practiced kendo to the point where even Yangxian could not meet, but after seeing this magnificent sword, he knew directly and clearly that he could not stop it. Where is this mysterious young man like a ranger? Everything seemed to be condensed, and the 8 Yangxian were even in midair, except for the sword running forward. The forbidden circle composed of hundreds of flags, under the impact of this magnificent long river of swords, only existed for a moment, and then instantly shattered. The 8-in-1 terror force, which should have bombarded the little emperor, were all destroyed in the long river. There are those who are closer, and the gods are cut off by the endless kendo on the spot. Who took another step, die. Jian Wushuang said indifferently, but his eyes never looked at the Yangxian from beginning to end, as if they were like air. The magic circle was broken, and the little emperor who sat on the ground looked at Jian Wushuang, and slightly raised the corner of his mouth. The thin purple robe and Chen Qing and others were on his side. Jian Wushuang looked at him indifferently, then turned his head slightly. Go. The 8 Yangxian encircled and stepped forward in time. One of the oldest black robe Yangxian stepped forward and gritted his teeth. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and said softly, "There is one who counts, and those who leave here, I can leave you a way of life. If you insist on blocking, You will all stay here. As soon as this word came out, all the black robe repairs were stunned, and then all looked strangely at Jian Wushuang. This young man dressed as a ranger, who can't see any identity or state, although it is extremely terrifying about Yanli's control, it is not incapable of dealing with it. Cowardly, instead of ranting? Is this really his skill or whole card, or is he outrageous? A group of Yangxian reacted first, and laughed for the first-year elder. It is not us that is left, but you are right. At the end of the speech, a magnificent beam of diffusive light poured out and ran straight to the sword without a double-sided door. He didn't even look at him with his right eye. Jian Wushuang slammed his body to the side, and a force with awe-inspiring killing force bombarded the past. The grinning smile holding the winning ticket even hung on the face. At the next moment, the older Yangxian flew directly out. It is enough for the elder who is in the realm of Yangxian realm to drink a pot. The sword Wushuang that has been completely released, without the baggage in his heart, just like entering the unmanned land, walks indifferently in the surrounding circle. If he is really unable to cope with it, the big picture directly summons the true shadow of the three emperors, and it will be completely cleared here. If the little emperor is investigated later, it may not be investigated further. Don't grind, you leave first, I'll take care of it. Jian Wushuang said softly. The thin purple robe solemnly thanked, and then opened the way with Chen Qing and others. Little emperor glanced back at Jian Wushuang, pretending to be relaxed. Thank you, I owe you once. Keep your life before you talk. He still had no extra expression. Chapter 4709. Jian Wushuang seems to always look like everything is in his chest, and he is impatient. From the perspective of Shaodijun, it seems that everyone around him is not like him, and he is a maverick. The invisible sword sprang up quietly, condensing around him. Together. 10 ways. Mandao. Countless invisible long swords rose from the sky and turned into a terrifying cloud covering the sky, hanging above the head of each black robe. A great horror between life and death surged in everyone's heart. Even Yangxian felt a chill in the sword curtain. Chen Qing, who was escorting the little emperor, looked back at this scene in shock, and there was a deep fear in his eyes flashing before turning around. Jian Wushuang's body was floating around like a lone sword that was independent of the rest of the world. No one could see through his thoughts and thoughts. As he moved forward every step, the sword curtain suspended above the sky dome. Stepped forward to make a copy. There are ancestor-level repairs that are bold and exogenous, a tentative step is taken, and there is a sword in the sky, and a sword is cut. Pooh is so subtle that it can no longer be subtle, just like the sound of dying, sounded in the sky city that is about to break. That ancestor-level Dingxiu was crushed into powder, and even the internal sources were broken together. There is no possibility of resurrection. Just a sword intention. He beheaded an ancestor level. Looking at the extremely dense sword curtain on the sky dome, all the ancestors stepped back subconsciously, and their faces were all horrified. For a time, even a few Yangxian dared not act rashly. Jian Wushuang glanced coldly at all of them, and his footsteps accelerated slightly. Although the sky is full of momentum, he knows that if he really wants to get started, these swords can at least be able to kill the 100 ancestors, and if the 8 Yangxian work together, I am afraid the effect will be greatly reduced. So Jian Wushuang is betting that they dare not step forward. Once out of this heavenly city, it would be much easier to escape. But within a few miles, the Yangxian glanced at each other, and a fierce outflow sprang out. No matter the sword curtain in the sky, they joined forces to siege up. Jian Wushuang was shocked in his heart, and he almost released the sword curtain without thinking. However, this sword curtain has a shock to the ancestor-level repair, but it is still a bit weak for the joint force of Yangxian. When a black-robe Yangxian waved his hand and shook his strength, he slammed all the sword curtains close to him and ran straight to Jian Wushuang. Boy, no matter who you are, just leave your life here today. 8 Yangxian rushed forward together, the strength of his hand was changing, and went straight to Jian Wushuang's pocket. After the majestic and terrifying force turned into a big net cover, Jian Wushuang pushed Spring and Autumn far away from the battle circle, snorted coldly, and held a long sword to confront. In a flash of 100,000 swords, the leading black robe Yangxian just waved his palms to seal it, and suddenly felt a sharp sword breaking through the void, and stabbed directly. In 1,000 shots, he made the most correct choice. His body suddenly slanted, and most of his left body instantly shattered. His body was broken, and the unbearable severe pain made him cry. A fluke's expression even hung in his eyes, but the sword and mango that broke out completely in the next moment ripped into pieces. All the top repairs are crazy, and no one controls the strength of Jian Wushuang's strength. They are all pressed like torrents. If the little emperor escapes, they have a chance to count, and there is no possibility of survival when they return to life. Only by killing him completely can they survive. The sword's two-sided color changed into one. At this moment, the boundless blazing power all rushed down to him, and the entire vast city was all under the pressure of terror. He didn't hesitate anymore. He directly led the sword and kneaded the two styles of the unparalleled swordsword into one form, forming an unparalleled sword. Leading into the sky, the madness of the force to suppress the sky is rapidly rising, and then resolutely hit the general trend of more than 500 people and 7 Yangxian forces. There is a giant gleam flashing in the galloping, the earth passing through the Chuantian domain is cracking, and the cracks in the heavens are like a prison, and the earth is fierce. We must know that the strength of each of the heavens in this great Yanhuan is far stronger than any place in the divine universe. Even there is no comparability between them. The place that can accommodate the immortals to sit and practice is already the ultimate place in the world. But Rao is such a heavenly domain, and both of them collapsed when they collided. The little emperor who was being surrounded by Chen Qing and the thin and small purple robe, after feeling the power of ruining the earth, suddenly a pale red appeared on his pale face. Then he suddenly broke free from Chen Qing and stepped on it, stepping directly on the waist of his 8-armed angry eyes, and took advantage of it to gallop behind him. "Little Emperor!" Chen Qing shouted anxiously, but he could not stop it. He could only watch the little emperor's figure go away. And the thin purple robe called Daban, without hesitation, returned almost at the moment when Xiaodi Jundong left. Chen Qing gritted his teeth, and then flew to the back of the fierce battle. The spring and autumn sitting on the shoulders of the 8 arms with angry eyes were also a bit dazed. For him, the little emperor went back to die, which was considered the hatred and resentment in his heart, but he also thought of the sword Wushuang that was broken by himself. Suddenly, the 8 arms under him stopped glaring, and Chuanqiu looked back, looking like a moth. At the next moment, he also flew back to his body without any hesitation. "Little Emperor, it's still a pleasure to die in my hands by myself. I'm going to save only Brother Jian." A unique sword that transcended the meaning of the previous kendo, and broke through the supreme trend layer by layer, but then it was replaced by a more vigorous Yanli theory. Jian Wushuang is supporting the dynamism in the body is madly passing, and it is already impossible to catch. As he prepared to call out the 3 emperors in desperation, a pair of palms without any blood, and next to him, stuck on the majestic momentum. Jian Wushuang was a little shocked. The person who came was not someone else. It was the little emperor who was likely to pass out almost at any time. "Did I let you go?" Under such oppression, Jian Wushuang still gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice. The little emperor smiled slightly, and a ray of divine blood overflowed again at the corner of his mouth. "After 6 days of return, you must be there. Don't forget, you still have a promise to help me ascend to the throne. If you are dead, I will lose a lot of money." The Yanli released with all his strength seems to have a heavy load on his divine body, and even his eyes can't be opened. But Rao is so, Xiaodijun seems to have something to export. Remember, you can't do it without you if you return for 6 days. Chapter 47:10. Jian Wushuang is really hard to say. Originally thinking of taking advantage of them to leave, he could call out the 3 emperors to end the battle. He never wanted to turn back again, which made Jian Wushuang's hard state of mind a little loose, but extremely helpless. Looking at the appearance of his strong crossbow, he was considering whether to kick it off, and then 2 or 3 strong breaths appeared. Chen Qing and the thin purple robe directly framed the little emperor. Chen Qing embarrassed, "Brother, I'm sorry, we have to take the little emperor away." Jian Wushuang heard the words, secretly relieved, and then quickly spoke, "Hurry away. Chen Qing nodded and stood ready to leave with the little emperor. No, I can't leave. The little emperor struggled. Jian Wushuang said helplessly, I'll be there later. Really? Really? Affirmed, Xiao Dijun nodded with satisfaction, then fainted. Immediately afterwards, Chuanqiu arrived and laughed, Brother Jian, it's time to fight side by side again. Jian Wushuang reported with a smile, turned around and looked at the little emperor who had gone away, secretly relieved, and then freed up a hand to open the bottle stopper. Every emperor, Zhenmo asked for help. Good boy, he is so suffocated that the emperor is almost unable to hold his breath in the bottle. The real shadow of the prestigious old man with long beard emerged from the bottle. Then an old man with a bizarre double pupil followed, and finally the tall, thin old man. With the true shadows of the three imperial clothes worn out, the entire Jingchuan reached the edge of collapse. Their appearance reversed the entire Tiancheng battle almost instantly. As the first digital Yangxian, after seeing this scene, his eyebrows jumped violently at the same time, and the figure drilled out of nowhere actually had a weird ripple floating on each body. Why do these guys have some familiar breath on them? The tall, thin old man moved. No matter who they are, let's kill them first. The old man of Wei stubbornly drank and immediately flicked his sleeves. The weight for the supreme majesty pressure squeezed away almost for a moment. The power that belongs to another level directly withstands the pressure of the nearly 1,000 ancestors, which makes Jian Wushuang one by one, and can free his hands. The three emperors shot at the same time, almost already laid the ending. The general situation was easily broken, and the three emperors rushed forward almost with a smile. With each wave of their hands, all the ancestors of the ancestors vanished, and even those Yangxian could not compete. If this emperor's true soul, Jian Wushuang, can still barely balance, then at the moment these three emperors appear, even he has only the part to kill. From Wan Mushan's taking away the three emperors, Jian Wushuang has a kind of unreal feeling, and these three supremely powerful helpers are almost confused, almost giving him the most terrible card directly in Dian Huan. Just the state of the true soul, it is easy to kill the current repair. Jian Wushuang dare not imagine, if this is the real body of the emperor, what a terrible strength. Looking at the almost ruined three emperors, Chun Qiu, who had already held the life and death coexisted, widened his eyes, and then looked at Jian Wushuang and smiled bitterly. Brother Jian, when we went to Wan Mushan, we did not come hard, or I'm afraid we're already outrageous. Jian Wushuang took this for granted. If Yang Jun, the true shadow of the tall and thin old man, was desperate at that time, they would absolutely not be able to stand here now. At the same time, it can also be seen that Xiao Dijun sent them both to Wan Mushan, and apparently wanted to use the hands of the three emperors to erase them. As a result, the image of Xiao Dijun was much worse in Jian Wushuang's heart. He had already figured it out in his mind, and after he cleared the enemies under his eyes, he and Chuanqiu walked away. Even if his little emperor has even greater energy, he can still extend his palm to the entire Dianhuan. After making the decision, Jian Wushuang did not have any hesitation anymore, and lifted up the sky, and the whole person turned into a sword with the most sharp edge, stab forward straight. This tragic battle eventually turned into one-sided slaughter with the arrival of the three emperors. With the tragic howl, the last Yangxian was directly crushed by the Wei old man. At this point, there are only less than 100 ancestors left in the mighty siege army. Leave, let us go. The head of the black robe ancestor stepped back slowly, his eyes showing despair. Jian Wushuang was cold-eyed, and stretched his hand to hold in the air, and the black robe ancestor covered his neck in pain and struggled. Who sent you? Why did you kill him? Asked one after another, all the surviving ancestors in black robes were horrified. If they said it, it would be no different from the immediate death sentence. Say. Jian Wushuang's sharp brows twisted into a Sichuan shape, and he increased his strength. Feeling the real life and death horror, the hard-breathed black robe ancestors never dared to hide. I don't know, I'm a father, a son. Without saying a word, the strange dark light directly emerged from his chest, burning his source. The remaining black robe ancestors saw it, and their faces were all horrified. At this moment, they all scattered and fled. Looking at the figure scattered in all directions, the old man with heavy pupils snorted coldly, and the 4 pupils in his eyes turned strangely. At the next moment, the entire sky dome suddenly became dark. With the darkness, there were countless strange eyeballs like the sun. All escaping black robe ancestors only felt that when they entered the mud, the air around them began to stagnate. Then they subconsciously looked at the sky dome, and faced with the countless big eye-like eyes. There seemed to be something that was quickly stripped from their bodies, and at the same time, the life that was so long that it almost had no end began to reverse. Each pupil of Dingxiu changed from panic to godlessness, finally died, and then fell straight to the ground like the same mud. Jian Wushuang's true look, at the same time that these tops were cultivating and declining, the roots poured into the eyeballs in the sky. This kind of mighty power should be the magical power of the old double pupil. Make another killing, guilty, and Su her old man will come with me to reflect on it carefully. The tall, thin old man looked serious, holding the old man with heavy pupils. The old man with heavy pupils withdrew his magical power, and squinted his lips in disdain. Come on, you two Yangxian who have been killed, I am afraid that even the heavenly court can't hold it. How dare you say it is a killing industry? Look, the killing heart is about to cover up the original heart. It seems that the emperor will be necessary to guide you in the future. The tall and thin old man said with a curse. Okay, don't say a few words, the elder Wei said, and then looked at Jian Wushuang. Xiaoyao's next plan? Chapter 47:11. Jian Wushuang's eyes were indecisive, and finally he said slowly, destroy this Jingchuan completely before leaving. The three emperors nodded with no refutation. Next, a horrible scene was staged. Headed by Jian Wushuang, unite the power of the three emperors to turn into unimaginable supreme power and sink to the earth. The Jingchuan, which had already been cracked in a large area, was completely destroyed. The gully-like abyss spreads deep into the earth's core, radiating the entire plain like a cobweb. In the end, this super heaven passed through the river and was broken, and countless ruins were turned into a giant boulder, wandering in the void. Many of them lived here in the Chuanzhong Dingxiu and have lost their homes. Looking at the heavenly ground broken into powder, Chuanqiu almost glared out his eyes, knowing that this Jingchuan is a legendary emperor's dojo, and it almost became the existence of a spare heaven. With a pity in my heart, Chuanqiu ignored the broken heaven that had no value anymore, and followed Jian Wushuang to prepare to leave. The three emperors re-entered the Boyang bottle as if they had never appeared from beginning to end. Brother Jian, from now on we will be high-flying birds, and the sea is wide by leaps and bounds. Wherever you go, I will follow you in the spring and autumn. There is absolutely nothing. The prisoner's career made him desperate for freedom. Jian Wushuang also smiled, looking at the vast yet strange Dian Huan. Even he began to feel a sense of powerlessness. In Dianhuan, who has surpassed his existing cognition, who wants to find those two existences, who knows that it will be an unknown future. Let's go one step at a time, I need a good idea. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. Chuanqiu kept busy and nodded, if Brother Jian does not know the next step, it would be better to go with me to the old site of my emperor's former heaven. Jian Wushuang did not nod or refuse. He was thinking about his next step. Unconsciously, the two of them walked out of the Jingchuan portal, but the next scene made Jian double-sided color slightly change. I saw that in the void where the boulders lay, three figures were sitting on a boulder. It seemed to wait for a long time, and when they appeared, they hurried. Brother Sword, I think you have encountered such a big movement. Chen Qing got up and beckoned from afar. Jian's double-faced color is obviously not good-looking. He didn't expect that the little emperor did not leave, but waited far away. Chuanqiu frowned slightly and whispered, Brother Jian, how are you going to kill it? While Jian Wushuang was hesitant, the little emperor in a coma slowly opened his eyes, wondering if he was confused or careless, and stepped forward subconsciously, actually fell directly from the boulder, straight into the void in. Jian Wushuang hurriedly manipulated Yang Li Ping to drag his falling figure and pulled it around. I knew that you would never die. Little Emperor said this last sentence while he was in a coma. Jian Wushuang was helpless. The eyes of Chuanqiu around him were cold, and he signaled his death. But Jian Wushuang shook his head. He didn't like the little emperor. He didn't like it, and he didn't rise to the endless situation. Chen Qing and the thin and small purple robe hurried over to take the little emperor in Jian Wu's hands. Then, the thin purple robe took something out of his arms and threw it in the air to meet the storm and became a giant ship. "Please, Master Sword, board the ship." He glanced at Jian Wushuang, then nodded. Because he was embarrassed to leave, Jian Wushuang had to get on the thief ship leading to the realm of 6 days again. Because the Jingchuan Tianyu was completely destroyed, Chen Qing had no place to stay, so he had to go to the 6th heaven realm together. Sitting on the bow of the ship, Jian Wushuang was struggling at the moment with the piece of the sky-shaped bone armor obtained from the Sky City. The pattern engraved on it by some tools was strange, but there were some vicissitudes in it. Xian. First, damn, why can't I see it now? Is it a matter of angle? Jian Wushuang carefully looked at the bone armor, and he actually saw the word Shenyi from the bone armor. Besides, what exactly was the guardian taking from my body? Supernatural power, ancestral art, or vitality? Jian Wushuang frowned at his palm, trying to find some difference in it, but while he was attentive, he was interrupted by a cold, deep voice. "Young master, I know it is you, and I will kill you when I go back." Jian Wushuang looked back. The voice came from Xiao Dijun's mouth, but it should be a dream, but after yelling this voice, he fell asleep again. The thin purple robe is constantly sending Yanli to try to make Xiao Dijun more comfortable. And at the same time, Chen Qing walked towards Jian Wushuang. For this tough, middle-aged man with few corners, Jian Wushuang did not have much resistance. After nodding, he was ready to continue to study the sky-shaped bone armor in his hand. "Brother Sword, I don't see much in Chen Qing's eyes, but you count one," Chen Qing sighed. "In the heavenly city, Sword Brother, the sword intention you released, I didn't realize it. Pass the prize, feel it with your heart, you will definitely go to that step." Jian Wushuang followed. Chen Qing smiled bitterly. I am afraid that Kendo can no longer be completed. After going to the 6-day realm, I really hope to be able to fight against the Sword Brothers 1 or 2 to see the gap between us. "Welcome at any time." Jian Wushuang nodded. A look of joy appeared on Chen Qing's face, and he slightly arched his hand at Jian Wushuang. It seemed like I remembered Jian Wushuang turned his head to look at Chen Qing and asked, "Who is the son of the sun he just corrected?" After hearing this, Chen Qing's face changed slightly, and after looking back at the little emperor, he said, "In fact, this is not a big secret. The people under the little emperor's seat are basically clear. The son-in-law in the mouth of the little emperor is actually his second brother." "Second brother?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, apparently recalling the original sentence that Xiao Dijun just said I would kill. Chen Qing also realized what Jian Wushuang thought, and smiled bitterly, but between their brothers, it is almost like a dead enemy now. This time the interception by the Chuanshencheng, I have also suspected that now through the little emperor's statement, it will be clear, it is likely that his second brother's son corrected, instructed. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows again, but he clearly remembered the battle of the interception. There were more than 15 Yangxian and nearly 1,000 ancestors. Such terrible handwriting is definitely the result of the complete elimination. It's an unusual battle between brothers. Chapter 47:12. And Jian Wushuang is also curious. How does this so-called prince correction have such a large energy? You should know that this is not a party for dinner, and a team can be formed by anyone who comes, but it is composed of 15 Yangxian and more than 1,000 ancestors. Being able to pull out such a team seems to be determined to put his brother to death. It's no wonder that Xiao Dijun was ruthless in his sleep to kill his son. If there is no Sword Wushuang, he is in a catastrophe and has already fallen into Jingchuan. But if there is no Jian Wushuang, he will not necessarily go to Jingchuan, and all this will not happen. Are you so sure that it was his second son's corrective actions? Jian Wushuang asked again. Chen Qingning frowned, then shook his head slightly. It's not certain, but there is a lot of suspicion. After all, after the little emperor came to this position, they began to fight between the 7 sons. Jian Wushuang nodded, then a little surprised. Wait, Qi Gongzi. Chen Qing nodded. There are 7 sons under the seat of Emperor Zhenwu Yang, namely, Gongzi Yang, Gongzi Jiao, Gongzi Yu, Gongzi Qian, Gongzi Mo, Gongzi Hua, Gongzi Lin. These 7 The little emperor's famous son Xian is also the eldest brother of the other 6 sons. Jian Wushuang listened to Chen Qing's careful explanation, nodded, and looked at the little emperor who was not far away, leaning on the deck and was still in a coma. Sure enough, Big Brother is not good. He knew that there must be some reason for this, and at the same time he recalled the conditions he had been forced to promise in the Bronze Temple. The first condition is to help him ascend to the throne, and within 70 years. But at the thought of those who haven't met each other, they felt the dreadful means of the sons. Jian Wushuang inexplicably felt a big head. Why did you kill Xiao Dijun? Although he knew in his heart that Xiao Dijun was not a good person, Jian Wushuang asked curiously. There was another bitter smile on Chen Qing's face. I'm afraid it's a bit inconvenient to say this. The things involved are more secretive and complicated. Jian Wushuang nodded. When he just wanted to respond, the thin purple robe walked slowly, as if there was no joy on the old cheek in a moment. There is nothing inconvenient to say. You have rescued Xiao Dijun many times, and you should also know some secrets. Slender Xiao Zipao spoke softly. Yongzi Yang died at an early age, his foundation was destroyed, and he was no longer able to practice, but his emperor Zhenwu Yang was particularly fond of him, and because he was the eldest son, he finally let him take the position of little emperor, but one after another 6 sons, all of them are absolutely stunning, and they all have a majestic trend, so they naturally will not convince the little emperor. Being a little emperor means all the heavens and all resources are inclined. As a result, the inevitable battle continues to this day. After listening to the brief description of the thin purple robe, Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. It turned out that he was involved in such a chaotic matter, I don't know whether it was happy or sad. At the same time, he was keenly aware that the skinny purple robe's eloquent expression must be the most secret thing hidden. However, Jian Wushuang didn't have the idea to continue to ask. In his opinion, he doesn't have too much trouble with Xiao Dijun and others, so it doesn't make sense to investigate too deeply. After leaving the broken Jingchuan Tianyu, Jian Wushuang and others did not return along the previous giant sea, but left in the other direction. After all, if there is a more terrible existence under the giant sea than the giant sea sky chapter, it is really a big trouble. Under the control of the thin purple robe, the giant ship floated through the vast void of Yanli's vast speed, and rushed back to the 6-day realm in a time that was twice as fast as before. This made Jian Wushuang scold Xiao Emperor again. Returning to the 6-day realm, this great voyage was completely over in less than 10 years, but the bizarre twists and turns experienced in it still gave Jian Wushuang a preliminary understanding of this great Yang Huan. It's just a corner of the heavens, it's so scary and terrible, but it's just that Dianhuan is a little bit more terrified. He can't think of what else he will encounter later, so he can only take one step at a time. After returning to the realm of 6 days, the thin Xiaopao and Chen Qing kept holding the little emperor and returned to the Degushan. Although Shaogushan and Degushan were given to Jian Wushuang by him, Jian Wushuang had not been to the site so far. A layer of warm water-like enchantment was swayed, and Jian Wushuang and Chuanqiu later entered it. Looking into the eyes, I saw that it seemed to have entered an untouched primitive green forest. The rich and extreme emerald green was the main color of this entire solitary sky. All kinds of exotic flowers and grasses open on the earth, and the life in the wild forest is almost as high as the extreme. This is not the most shocking place, and in the middle of this big lonely sky, there stands a giant tree like a giant pillar of Optimus. The sturdy main branch is wide and geometrically unknown, and the dark green canopy on the top of the head is like a cloud in the sky, almost covering the entire sky of the big lonely sky. It seems that the entire solitary ecosystem is just like a giant tree. The old thin purple robe headed took the little emperor who was still in a coma, and swept toward the crown of the giant tree. Brother Sword, please come with us. Chen Qing slightly arched his hand, and then took a meal, then his body galloped forward. Looking at the giant tree in front of him, Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. 1 foot stepped in the mist-like clouds, soft touch came under his feet. Jian Wushuang looked around again, then slowly stepped forward. Above the canopy of this giant tree is a more elegant warm pavilion. Chuanqiu is reluctant to enter it. It is convenient to wait outside and wait for the sword to be unparalleled. Walking into this warm pavilion, I saw a bed in the center. I don't know what kind of material is made of bed. The little emperor was placed on it, his face calmed down a lot, and the cold sweat of the temples stopped the outflow. If you look closely, you can see that countless powerful breaths of life gather in the air into the bed, and then constantly moisturize and repair his body. Jian Wushuang guessed that this special bed should have an inseparable relationship with this big lonely tree. Seeing that Xiao Emperor's expression gradually stabilized, Chen Qing and others were secretly relieved. Jian Wushuang saw this situation, and then stayed for a moment, then slowly left the Nuan Pavilion. Outside the Nuan Pavilion, Chuanqiu was alone, staring at this side of the world, and when he saw him coming out, he withdrew his thoughts and greeted with a strong smile, "Brother Jian." Chapter 47:13. Jian Wushuang nodded, and saw that Chunkius' mood was not high, but he didn't say much. He carried him out of this lonely day together. Within the days of Xiao Jiyu, above the clouds of the sky, Jian Wushuang looked at him. "Want to kill the little emperor to get revenge?" Chuanqiu stunned, and then shook his head a little. "Although he is also the guy I wish to kill on the spot, but compared to others, I would like to be the first to personally edge his emperor." Jian Wushuang knew that there must be a secret fortune in it. As long ago, he knew that Chuanqiu was not an ordinary cultivation, but the son of a former emperor of heaven. "My emperor Fenghua Emperor died in the hands of Zhen Wuyang, and the entire heavenly court was destroyed. Finally, I was the only one left and became a prisoner. The past is long gone, but he is still entangled in spring and autumn like a chain, making him fall into anger all the time. Although he could not wait for Wuyang to be at the moment, sadly, he didn't even have the qualification to see him, and even heavenly court didn't know where." Jian Wushuang didn't say comfort, but put his palm on Chunkius' shoulder and patted it gently. Chuanqiu glanced at him gratefully, and said slowly, "Brother Jian, if it were not for your presence, I am afraid that I am still a prisoner in the dark Montenegro." Jian Wushuang said softly, "Living well and continuously improving your strength will make you one day able to fight the enemy." Chuanqiu nodded vigorously. "Brother Jian, rest assured, I believe there will be such a day." In addition, he hesitated suddenly, and said after a moment, "Brother Jian, if there is one day, will you help him?" In the mouth of spring and autumn, he naturally refers to the little emperor. Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head without hesitation. "At that time, I am afraid that I have already left here. Everything you worry about will not happen. What you need most now is to continuously strengthen your own strength." Chuanqiu nodded, and then took the slap-sized 8-armed arms out of his arms, and returned them to the front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang smiled and stretched his hand to push the 8 arms back. "This thing is not very useful to me. It can be used as a self-defense for you, but don't rely too much on it." Spring and autumn no longer quit, very carefully put his 8 arms back into his arms. "Chuanqiu, the emperor in your mouth is the realm after Yangxian. Is it just a title?" On this issue, Jian Wushuang has not inquired before, and today it suddenly sounded and he intends to ask. Although spring and autumn haven't set foot in Yangxian now, he is the son of a real emperor, so naturally he knows something better than Jian Wushuang. Chuanqiu heard the words and said carefully, "The emperor is actually a respectable title, not a realm, but a real watershed. From my childhood, when I heard the emperor's admonitions, I vaguely knew that I wanted to be an emperor, to have luck, to form the avenue of heaven, and to my own realm. And the most important step to become an emperor is to enter that level. But, Chunkius' memory seems a little vague, I seem to forget what level it is." Jian Wushuang nodded his head. He had long realized that the true souls of the 3 emperors he had contacted first had already taken the step of Yangxian. "I am afraid that if you want to become the emperor who created a heaven, the real thing is to step out of the mysterious realm of Yangxian." As for what realm there is, Jian Wushuang was blinded and could only move forward and realize it carefully. As far as he is concerned, with the shadow of the 3 emperors, it is enough to protect themselves from the powerful forces on either side. There is no big sun hanging over the sky of Shaogushan, but it has never been dark, and it will always be a quiet day, which is very similar to the scene in the sky down the mountain. It was only a few days after he had talked with spring and autumn at random, Jian Wushuang began to practice. He took out several kendo solitary books he had bought in Jingchuan Tiancheng. Looking at the traces of the simple and vicissitudes of life, Jian Wushuang estimated the age of these solitary books. I am afraid that he would be tens of thousands of years old. There are 4 solitary books in total, and the ancient atmosphere sealed on it has been seriously worn away. Almost immediately, the imprint is gone with the wind. These 4 solitary books were all randomly selected by him from various Yangxian, and they are the oldest swordsmanship of this great Yanhuan. 3 of them are the most basic foundations for teaching kendo, which is of great benefit to those practicing kendo, and judging from the remaining atmosphere in these isolated books, the writers have reached the state of Yangxian when they created these kendos. Quickly absorbing the knowledge of kendo in 3 solitary books like a whale sucking water, Jian Wushuang finally looked at the last book. The 2 simple and fierce characters of Genji seem to be written on the homepage at will with a straw stick dipped in ink. Jian Wushuang was a little puzzled. It seemed that he had forgotten which vendor he bought this solitary book from. He looked very unimpressed. Putting aside his distractions, he opened the first page with a wave of his hand. What came into view was a blank. On the yellowish paper glowing dark blue, not even half a word appeared. Jian Wushuang groaned in his heart. No, don't you encounter a profiteer here? He who did not believe in evil, hurriedly looked up and down. Eventually it was concluded that the profiteers were cheated. This is simply a wordless book. Jian Wushuang couldn't help crying and laughing, and after exploring it again with his strength, and determined that it was worthless, he was ready to throw it away. However, at the next moment, there was a touch of warm and cold breath in his hand. If he did not observe it carefully, he would never find it. He looked subconsciously at the sword collection in his hand, a fairy-like atmosphere with extreme air just like a cloud of smoke, but just rotated a moment above the solitary book, and instantly fell into the book. Seeing something, Jian Wushuang hurriedly opened the Wu Zi Tian Shu in his hand again. On the yellow paper with the dark blue color, the fairy air turned to the ultimate breath, like a finger-sized startled dragon, hovering above the paper. Jian Wushuang's eyes opened to the maximum, and some could not guess where this familiar and strange atmosphere came from. Soon, the breath of fine clouds suddenly condensed and instantly turned into a figure only the size of a fingernail. He held his breath completely, and the scene seemed a little strange at the moment. The thumb-sized figure is very compact, but the white shirt on her body looks magnificent and has the style of a generation of guru. Although this villain made up of yin yang has no facial features, but he showed a breath that made Jian Wushuang familiar and extremely familiar with the feeling of an old friend. Chapter 47:14. Jian Wushuang didn't dare to speak at all, and tried his best to hold his breath, fearing that he would blow this villain away with one breath. Standing on the yellow paper pages, the villain's white shirt fluttered in the wind, and then he moved. Rising in the wind, another cloud of smoke emerged in his hands as a real sword. The momentum changed, and this inch of Xu Jianfang's book pages seemed to become a performance martial arts field. The villain in the most central position, arbitrarily practiced one trick, stirred up the whole body. In Jian Wushuang's eyes, every style of this yin-yang villain is like a sword style after being dismantled and refined, and it is slowly and extremely practiced. The more he looked at it, the more shocked he felt that he could not ignore the sharpness and horror from this sword style. However, Jian Wushuang soon became immersed in it, fighting with the villain through the consciousness. 2 very different kendos collide in such an incredible way. If Chuanqiu is on the side of the sword Wushuang, you can certainly see a funny scene in this strange. Jian Wushuang frowned, holding a lone book spread out one page, as if sitting on a boat. The figure swayed from side to side, and from time to time, there was a big flip, which was extremely funny. And this scene ended with the little man standing on the page of the book, standing upright and standing, without a fancy sword. Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes, a drop of sweat poured out from the temples, and hurriedly looked into the pages. The little man standing on the pages of the book seemed to have completed the task. The figure dissipated directly, and turned into a cloud of smoke, which fell on the pages of the book. Immediately afterwards, a more mysterious scene appeared. On the pages of the original book without words, Yun Yang was outlined by Yun Yang. This, how is it possible? Jian Wushuang was shocked to no avail. Through the game of Shenyu just now, he has been very clear that this Yunyang villain is the Ding Bai transformation who had been in the Divine Power universe and talked to him about 100,000 years of swordsmanship. But how could his kendo villain appear here? There is no answer. As the last word stops, it represents Ding Bai's swordsmanship, which is finally fully integrated in the book. A total of 5 pages full of kendo analysis pages were rustled by the wind. Swallowing his dry throat, Jian Wushuang gazed at the page. With just a glance, his heart shuddered unstoppably. The swordsmanship written on the page of the book is all the sword meaning of Sword Fairy Ding Bai's first type of absolute sword. It's too much. Isn't this book perfect? After being immersed in it for nearly a day, Jian Wushuang sent out a sigh of emotion. This sword set actually completely dissected Ding Bai's unique sword. I am afraid that even if Ding Bai personally wrote the description, it would not be so detailed. Jian Wushuang was so confused that he couldn't understand how such a wordless book had recorded Ding Bai's swordsmanship. 5 pages of paper all depict that type of sword, which shows how detailed it is. Fortunately, Jian Wushuang's ability to accept is extremely strong. After a short period of hesitation, Jian Wushuang practiced hungrily against the analysis of the pages. The more in-depth study, the more frightening the sword Wushuang, this inexplicably strange set of swords, almost Ding Bai's underpants have been pulled out. It's just that there is only Ding Bai's style, and then everything will be blank. What is the origin of this wordless book? Is it possible to reprint everyone's swordsmanship? Jian Wushuang closed the sword set, and the tone of tossing and turning looked. Then he subconsciously poured his own sword into it. The scene of Xianqi happened again, and the cloud smoke transformed from Jian Wushuang's sword intentions was ever-changing, and finally it was also condensed into a pocket version of Jian Wushuang, and began to learn kendo while standing on the page. The unparalleled swordsmanship of the complete frame has been constructed, the starry lake, the lake and the sword, as if all the rivers and seas are poured on the pages of the book. This time, 10 full pages were covered with small prints, 5 pages with star-shaped swords and 5 pages with river-shaped swords. Jian Wushuang was dumbfounded and hurriedly scrutinized. In this light, his face was pale. The sword meaning engraved on the page of the book is almost nothing to describe the essence of the 2 styles of sword meaning, just like the thoughts of the sword Wushuang's consciousness, completely developed. It's terrible, what the is this? Jian Wushuang endured the tremor in his heart and probed carefully. At this moment, the slightly strange sound of Chuanqiu sounded. Brother Jian, what's wrong with you? Holding a wordless book, I'm so happy and surprised. Jian Wushuang suddenly lifted up, looking to the side for a long time and a confused face. You mean, no words? Chuanqiu nodded, then pointed at the sword without the book in both hands. Isn't this the wordless book, all blank? Jian Wushuang looked at the spread pages, and the books on kendo were densely recorded, but in spring and autumn, it was wordless. Are you sure this book is wordless? Jian Wushuang asked. Chuanqiu looked down and looked at him. It's indeed wordless. What's wrong with you, brother Jian? Is there any stimulation? Jian Wushuang shook his head, and his mind seemed to be somewhat clear. This collection of swords seems to have the horror skills that can print all kinds of stunning kendo in it, and it seems that only users can see it. In other words, with this collection of swords, wouldn't it be possible to unscrupulously expand others' swordsmanship? Suppressing the restlessness in his heart, Jian Wushuang was about to open his mouth to return to spring and autumn, when a clear voice rang from Shaogushan's enchantment. Brother Sword, Chen Qingta came here for a visit. In the rippling ripples, Chen Qing, who changed to a white shirt, appeared to be immortal. Jian Wushuang also stood up and smiled with a distant hand. Zhenmo welcomes you here. Chen Qing smiled heartily again, and hurriedly stepped in front of Jian. Was double-sided. I haven't seen you in the last 10 days. The Sword Brothers are still the same martial arts as always. Brother Chen has praised, and has been neglecting to practice recently, and laughed. He responded with a bitter smile. For this familiar Chen Qing, although Jian Wushuang did not resent it, he also kept a distance between his subconscious mind. However, Chen Qing didn't seem to feel Jian Wushuang's estrangement, and smiled, just as the little emperor's state has also stabilized. I came to this little lonely day to find the sword brothers to describe the old. After all, this little solitary sky is really good, full of vitality, and the spirit of the spirit is far beyond the ordinary realm. The sword brothers are practicing and sitting here, which will definitely be of great help. Jian Wushuang nodded. It's not bad. Jianmo just stayed here temporarily. I don't know the mystery. Chapter 47:15. Chen Qing smiled and said, with the skill of the sword brothers, it is not difficult to ask the little emperor to play this little lonely day. Jian Wushuang also smiled. Chen Qing still didn't know that Xiao Dijuan had already given him this little orphan and big orphan together. Since he didn't know, he simply didn't answer. This is not something to show off, but a means of restraining the sword. Chen Qing didn't care about his silence, he raised his eyebrows, and smiled. Brother sword, we are all idle today, why not discuss one or two? Jian Wushuang wanted to decline, and again seemed to realize what he was, nodding and saying, follow you. Good. Chen Qing answered, Brother sword, let's start now. When the words fell, Chen Qing retreated abruptly, rising from the top with a mighty force, running like a dragon above the sky dome, wantonly arrogant. Chunkia's face changed slightly, and he hurried forward, whispering, Brother Jian, I can feel that the release of the surname Chen's dynamism will not stop here, and must not be treated with ordinary heart. Relax, we just discuss some swordsmanship, not a battle of life and death. Jian Wushuang replied. Chuanqiu nodded, and then quickly launched this battle circle. Thousands of centimeters, the grass is slightly covered. A real sword with the meaning of emerald green quietly appeared in Chen Qing's hands, making his whole person's breath change, just like the sword to be opened by the Tibetan front. Jian Wushuang also pulled out the broken tarot Excalibur at the waist and looked at the front calmly. The Tai Luo Excalibur, which was broken to the center of the sword, not only did not decline, but sent out a few excitement. Chen Qing's eyes narrowed slightly, and he reminded him aloud, Brother sword, only on kendo. Come on. Shun grasped the hilt and Jian Wushuang responded with a deep voice. How could he not know that Chen Qing was taking care of him? If the realm is completely released, I am afraid that this Chen Qing will never be lower than that of the whirling ancestors in the whirling days, or even pass it. There was no talking, and there was a sense of killing. The whole square was 1,000 feet away, so quiet that the needle could be heard. At the next moment, Chen Qing took the lead, the whole figure was like an unstoppable arrow, carrying the mighty power, and went straight to the sword without stab. There was a burst of sonic booms in the space, and it was cracking quickly. The unremarkable straight stab was so fast that the spring and autumn that had been watching from afar didn't react, so he went straight to Jian Wushuang's chest and stabbed it. If this blow is in the middle, even if it is not dead, it will definitely be hit hard. However, Jian Wushuang was faster than him. As early as this straight sprint came, a broken sword body was blocked at the right time. Zheng. The two swords fought, and a trembling burst out. Chen Qing, who flew through the sky, only felt that if the real sword tip in his hand met the mountain giant river, he could hardly score a half. Jian Wushuang also felt an incomparable great force, making him retreat half a step to relieve the force. Missing a hit, Chen Qing smiled and straightened his sword back. This short trial made some concepts in both minds. Brother sword, and watch me Chen Qing kendo. An arrogant voice resounded. In the next moment, a gang wind blew directly from within 1,000 feet of the body, and Jian Wushuang was in it, which was inexplicably a bit of a sense of crisis. The sky dome changed slightly, and the earth quietly sprang out of an inch of gully. Chen Qing held the hilt in both hands, and there seemed to be a sword floating in his eyes. Countless strands of pale blue sword intentions emerged from his body, and then all returned to the sky above the head, and a real sword was condensed. This kind of sword curtain that covers the sky is very familiar with sword Wushuang. This is a kind of figurative sword, simple and easy to learn, suitable for group fighting. However, when the swordsmanship is equal or even higher than oneself, using this formula is equivalent to finding death and falling down. Jian Wushuang did not understand Chen Qing's intentions, but when he looked at the top of his head again, his gaze was fixed. I saw in the middle of the head, a giant sword almost called Genshan, seemed to carry the mighty power of millions of mountains and rivers, and fell. It turned out that this unfolding sword curtain is a blind eye method. The real sword is the sword hidden in it. In the sword that could be called Genshan directly fell down, Gen Wushuang's mouth slowly raised a smile. Boom! The whole small solitary land was trembling violently, and the vast Genshan fell into the ground without any obstruction, and Jian Wushuang's figure was also pressed under the sword mountain. All around, all collapse. After seeing this scene, Chunky's heart almost jumped out of his throat, and then he rushed forward. Chen Qing, who soared into the sky, was also trembling in the heart. Judging from the swordsmanship that Jian Wushuang performed in Jingchuan Tiancheng, it was absolutely impossible to catch his first sword. But soon he seemed to realize something again, and he tapped his head anxiously. This place is confused. Brother Sword is here to save you. Chen Qing recalled that Jian Wushuang had fierce battles in Jingchuan dozens of days ago, and destroyed Jingchuan by his own efforts. It was certainly impossible to recover in this short period of time, and it was normal that he could not take his sword. Don't be hit hard, otherwise the little emperor will not be able to bypass me. In my heart, when I was about to go to Genshan, Chen Qing, a pure sword of extreme intentions rose from the sky. The whole Genshan flashed out the most bright beams of hundreds of millions. Married to death. Chen Qing was shocked, and then withdrew, and then looked at the top of Genshan, which was rapidly collapsing. Above the top, a figure dressed in a black shirt ranger is sitting above, looking under the sky with a smile. The broken tarot Excalibur in his hand trembles unceasingly, and seems to have been unable to suppress it. At the next moment, when the entire Genshan mountain completely collapsed, the sword Wushuang fluttered down, holding the Tai Luo Excalibur, and the lightly written sword fell. If the sky falls on the Milky Way for 9 days, the entire sky dome burst under this heavy pressure. It seems to be endless, but it is a straightforward understatement, expanding thousands of miles in the sky, as if Tianwei is here. Chen Qing, who stepped on the earth, looked up at this scene, the right hand holding the real sword trembling slightly. That kind of majestic and extreme sword is exactly the sword he longed for the most, and it is also the most incredible sword that makes him today. It turned out that, besides that one, there are people who can practice kendo to such a terrible and ancient point. A flash of excitement flashed in Chen Qing's eyes, and the state that had been suppressed was also unconsciously climbing to the top again. He has made up his mind to use his peak state to collide and to enlighten the sword to make up for his swordsmanship. The terrible strength of Chen Qing has made Chen Qing's breath rise to an impossible level. It seems that even the ancestors who were about to break through Yangxian were not their opponents. The real sword in his hand issued a red horn, pointing directly at the sky dome, heaven and earth. Chapter 47:16. Spring and Autumn, who was running fast, only felt like he was hit by a heavy punch in the head, and the whole person flew out directly. As he flew out, the tremendous power of the earth burst completely. Like the ringing of the eternal clock, the polar day that can't be looked at directly lights up. Spring and Autumn was horrified, but found that in its own realm cannot escape the horror shockwave. At this moment, he only felt a strong wind blowing on his back, like a big palm, firmly supporting his figure. Chuanqiu looked unconsciously behind him and saw a luxurious emperor with a pale complexion, and the purple robe that remained unchanged forever. I don't know when he was standing behind him. The tremendous strength enveloped the three of them, and turned them into an enchantment to stop the terrible martyrdom. Mate, guess who loses and win? Xiao Dijun's expression did not fluctuate, and he looked slowly in front of him. The thin purple robe raised his head, and his unclear eyes looked at the center of martyrdom. Chen Qing, he has lost. In this simple dialogue, the martyrdom produced by the martyrdom slowly dissipated, and a huge crater on the other side appeared. On the two sides of the giant pit, there are two figures. The sword has no double-sided color and no waves. The black shirt seems to be covered with dust only on the dress, and the Tai Luo Excalibur in his hand is trembling. On the other side, although Chen Qing's figure was a bit embarrassed, the excited and belligerent man's in his eyes grew stronger. His heart is very clear. If it was not the realm that was just released, Jian Wushuang's blow, with his first style of sword, it would be impossible to catch it. But what about that? Today he will try out all the swordsmanship of Jian Wushuang by himself, and try his best to turn it into his own. After all, it is almost impossible to meet another person like Kuang Xianxian. The sharp breath surged again. If Chen Qing was still in the state of being in front of Tibet when he was the first sword, then now, he is already full of strength. At this time, Jian Wushuang said the word far away, 2 swords. Chen Qing's eyes narrowed, a sword far beyond his previous body floated around him, and at the same time, one side was like the sun's light wheel, and a figure appeared behind her. This time, it was still Chen Qing who took the lead. Huang Huang's general momentum rose in an instant, and in that light wheel, it was actually agitating Wanshan lightsaber. The light wheel rotates, and a light sword with a handle around the red-gold pattern is like a giant wave, and the head is smashed towards the sword. Jian Wushuang is very speechless, he can't figure it out. Although Chen Qing's swordsmanship is not very strong, it should be enough to stand proudly. But at the moment, the spirit of the sword he released, although magnificent, was too broad, but he lost his subtlety, causing Jian Wushuang to see his weakness at a glance. The swordsmanship practiced by Chen Qing is tolerant and magnificent, but overall weak. Jian Wushuang moved forward, carrying an invisible sword, facing the wall almost composed of sword blades, a sword stabbed. This sword is an absolute sword written by Ding Baiyi, which discards everything and his own sword. A barely subtle white horn flashed, and the weak point of the sword tapped the water like a fish. A layer of ripples wafted slightly. This sword is a mixture of hundreds of thousands of swords. Along with the ripples, Wen Jian shattered and the glory shattered. Carrying the light wheel, Chen Qing shivered slightly at the moment when the sword of Huang Huang was broken. He seemed to smell a familiar breath, and the memory that was so long gone was quietly pouring into his heart. The little emperor and the thin purple robe around him couldn't conceal their eyes at the moment. So much so that when Jian Wushuang's awe-inspiring sword chopped off Chen Qing's strands of hair, he let him recover. "You are strong. I have lost in kendo." A bitterness appeared on Chen Qing's face. On the 2 swords in a row, he lost completely. Jian Wushuang did not put away the long sword in his hand, but instead looked at Chen Qing with a smile, not caring about his unfair actions before. "Brother Chen, let's discuss with each other, regardless of winning or losing, only talking about kendo. If I guess well, you should have a sword." Chen Qing heard the words, his eyes lighted up, and then dimmed again. "Brother sword guessed right, but my sword is still just a frame, and it has not been through. If kendo doesn't go through any practice, then it's just a frame after all. This is the case with the practice of Wu's worry." Jian Wushuang whispered, and then his wrist shook, and the invisible long sword trembled. Chen Qing's eyes were fiery, and his militant intentions rose again. "Then Chen Mao will be ugly." The words fell, and the real sword in his hand quietly shook, the earth shook, and the gully was ravaged. 10 paths like the dark blue sword of the heavenly giant column ripped open the ground, rising like a frightened dragon. Chen Qingning stood in the same place, his real sword pointed directly at the sky dome, and the 10 magnificent giant horns made everything dark blue. Jian Wushuang stood in the void, looking at the front calmly, and then the invisible sword was thrown into the air by him. At the next moment, 10 dark blue sword-inspired giant pillars, wrapped in all powers, intertwined with each other, and covered the sky and the town. At the same time, the invisible sword that was thrown in the air was quietly decomposed and transformed into hundreds of thousands of swords. Jian Wushuang's hands were behind his back, and then hundreds of thousands of sword intentions condensed under him, like the galaxy in the sky. The little emperor who watched from afar, his eyes narrowed slightly, and there seemed to be a faint smile in the corner of his mouth. After seeing Jian Wushuang better than the previous sword intention, Chen Qing's intensely intense gaze has been replaced by bitterness. This is just the sword of the frame, it seems that it will die before it is created. Jian Wushuang stepped on Tianhe Jianyi, his eyes were extremely calm from beginning to end. Under the imminent collision of the two, everything seemed to stagnate for a moment. There was no tremendous sound, but only a slight whisper like a clear spring. Chen Qing froze. The sword meaning that belongs to Jian Wushuang disappeared, and disappeared at the moment of the collision. The sword intention, exuding a magnificent dark blue color, without hindrance, finally burst into the sky. Everyone unconsciously stretched out their hands to cover their eyes, and then gazed at them again. Jian Wushuang didn't know when to appear on the ground. His right hand pressed the handle of the Tai Luo Excalibur between his waists, and nodded slightly toward Chen Qing. Everyone saw it really. In this last confrontation, Jian Wushuang dispersed himself on that day and did not contend with it. This represents the completion of Chen Qing's kendo. Chen Qing recovered, and solemnly arched the sword. Wushuang, thank you, brother Jian. He knew very well that if the sword intention of Jian Wushuang had just fallen, he would have no chance of victory. Chapter 47:17. Not only is there no chance of winning, but kendo will be extremely likely to be in vain, and staying in this framework irreparably. Jian Wushuang dispersed the sword that would win, and completed Chen Qing's sword heart. Chen Qing's swordsmanship is not stunning, but if its momentum is magnificent, it has a sense of detachment, and Jian Wushuang can't bear to destroy it, so he stopped. But the power of the three swords has completely left an indelible stroke in Chen Qing's heart. At this moment, a lazy applause came from a distance. Jian Wushuang stared at it, only to realize that it was Xiao Dejuan and others. Stepping into the air, Chuanqiu took the lead in a hurry and gave him a thumbs up. Brother Jian, great. Jian Wushuang smiled, and then looked at the little emperor. Thank you Zhenxiong for letting me see such a shockingly brilliant sword. Xiao Dijun smiled. Young Master Yang, admire something. Returning to peace, Jian Wushuang said. The little emperor said, it is not a matter to say that it is a thing, but I just want to talk to the older brother Zhenxiu. Chen Qing scratched his head. Little emperor, I'm really embarrassed to make you a little lonely like this. Now this little solitary sky is not mine. Even the big solitary sky is handed over to brother Jian. You should ask him whether he blames you or not. Xiao Dejuan glanced at Jian Wushuang Road. Chen Qingdeng understood immediately. Brother Sword, this little solitary sky is already yours. Jian Wushuang shook his head and said, it's just a temporary stay, not the possession of Zhenmo. It will be returned as soon as the time comes. Chen Qing also understands people. In order not to make the atmosphere too embarrassing, he hurriedly said, Brother Sword, on the sword just now, Chen Mao admires the 5-body investment. You are definitely I have seen, except for the old friend. Outside the kendo first. Brother Chen, I praise it, I just have some experience. There is still a way to go before I can truly understand kendo. Jian Wushuang responded lightly. Chen Qing was quite emotional. Yeah, I thought I had planned to practice kendo at the beginning, but I was helpless with a dull, seemingly simple kendo. I haven't seen it until now. Such illusory things are far more than cultivation. In my opinion it's harder. Jian Wushuang did not answer. He seemed to have never stopped at a certain moment in his perception of kendo, and then stagnated, and naturally there was no resonance. The atmosphere is subtle, and if there is another Chen Qing chattering, I am afraid that Jian Wushuang will leave on the spot. Chen Qing, I'll take you to Degushan for a turn. The thin purple robe who hadn't spoken suddenly said. Chen Qing, who was talking about the excitement, waved his hand. I have nothing to say about Degushan, I have turned it more than 10 times. Then he realized that it was not right again, and suddenly he closed his voice, and said with a serious face, yes, I haven't seen it in Degushan, it is really time to check it out. Sword brothers take care. After arching his hand, Chen Qing quickly left Shaogushan with the thin purple robe. At this moment, there were only 3 people left in this little solitary day. Chuanqiu, please go sit down first. Jian Wushuang looked at Chuanqiu and said. Chuanqiu nodded and heard a word of caution before moving away. Let's walk around together at random, come back from Jingchuan, this is the first time we meet. Xiao Dejuan said. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then the two proceeded slowly. In mid-air, feeling the strong dynamism surging around him, his tight nerves were relaxed. Jingchuan was destroyed, and my power has weakened a little bit. You should know some of these things, such as who sent me the guys who killed me. Said Xiao Yujun Yuyu. Jian Wushuang said softly, when I returned, My partner around you said something to me, and I knew a little bit. The little emperor nodded. Then you have to prepare, there are still 5 years left, when I want you to go to the banquet with me. Go to the banquet? His eyes suddenly became a bit cold. Yes, my emperor invited, it was a feast of heaven, and then those animals will go with them. Jian Wushuang nodded, but he really wanted to see what kind of existence the so-called heavenly court and emperor in the great Yang Huan belonged to. You plan to kill them at the banquet? Jian Wushuang asked. Little emperor sneered. They? A group of self-sufficient waste, just let them go for the time being, I need to do much more than that. In 5 years, I will come to you when the time comes. You can also go to Degushan to practice. I am here. The little emperor's eyes were scorching, and he said seriously, if you don't have you next, I will surely be helpless, so please stand by me anyway. Jian Wushuang's inexplicable feeling was a bit unnatural. I'm sure I can't say anything. After hearing the exact answer, Xiaodijun left with a big smile, leaving 8 words on the occasion of leaving. You have everything to do as a guarantee. At this point, the entire lonely day was completely silent. Seeing Xiaodijun's figure disappearing outside the enchantment, Chuanqiu quickly came to Jianhua's double-faced front road. Won't this guy be paying attention again? Jian Wushuang did not conceal, and said that he was going to heaven and feast 5 years later. Chuanqiu said anxiously, I know this guy's temperament, he has so many discordant brothers, he will inevitably bleed and fight. Then brother Jian, do you really want to blend in? Jian Wushuang shook his head, go step by step, and wait until I figure it out here, and it's not too late to leave. In short, everything is careful, he is far more gloomy than the surface, and he is not a good person, Chuanqiu said solemnly. At first, he was just a hard-working man. I can't escape from him. If his 6 younger brothers were really wicked, then he would be no better. Hearing Chunkius' warning, Jian Wushuang nodded, and he had his own judgment. From the perspective of so many prisoners trapped in the next 3 days, that little emperor is naturally not a good person. What Jian Wushuang can do now is to protect himself to the utmost extent, and then he slowly explores it. After discussing with Chuanqiu for another half day, the two stepped into the pavilion of this lonely heaven together. This little solitary sky is not a vast expanse, but it is many times larger than a starfield in the divine universe. At the same time, except for some exotic beasts in the wild forest, few people set foot in it. In the center of the entire Shaogushan, there is a grand palace. Stepped into this silent palace, Jian Wushuang looked at it, and then he sat down. The long wind blew past slowly, and Jian Wushuang sat on the square outside the palace pavilion, voicing his strength. There are 18 copper columns on the left and right of the square covered with solemn copper, which is vaguely similar to the original Yunxiao Palace. Chapter 47:18. Jian Wushuang looked at it for another 4 weeks before he finally settled in. From the past of the Divine Force universe, he became an immortal from the ancestor level. However, with the strength of his Yangxian realm, during the several years after he entered Dianhuan, he did not meet the time of life and death. Even Juhai Tianzhong and the whirling ancestors of Wutian did not give him a real fear of life and death. Jian Wushuang vaguely guessed that it would be the watershed to really take that step out of the realm of Yangxian. Not long after sitting in Dingwu, he seemed to realize something again, and reached out and walked out of the arms without the word. Turning over the first 15 pages of the book full of small prints, Jian Wushuang's gaze stayed on page 16, but there was nothing but blank. Shouldn't it? I was talking about Chen Qing with the sword just now. Why is there nothing in this book? With a somewhat skeptical attitude, Jian Wushuang tried to transfer the battle memory in the consciousness out of array. The wisp of consciousness soon sank into the pages of the book. Without disappointing Jian Wushuang, this consciousness of cloud smoke began to be written directly, and the regular small prints appeared on the blank pages. And this time the writing speed is extremely fast, almost tens of breaths, and I have all finished writing. The number of pages has changed from the original number of pages to a thin one. No, Chen Qing's kendo, there are so few places to write. Jian Wushuang was a little unbelievable, quickly looked through it, and after confirming that there was really only one page, some could not laugh or cry. But then, a more mysterious scene appeared, that Chen King Jiandao, which was originally only one page, disappeared line by line. It's like there is a pair of big hands in the midst, which is erasing. No, what's this operation? Jian Wushuang secretly wondered, wouldn't this Genji despise Chen Qing's kendo, so it was erased again? Without an answer, Jian Wushuang could only watch Chen Qing's kendo, and disappeared completely. It's a really weird sword collection. He looked at the loan book in his hand and at the same time thought that if he meets a guy like Ding Bai in the future, wouldn't he be able to print it and steal the teacher? Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. This sword set is simply the ultimate treasure. The predecessor who created this sword set is probably an interesting guy. After personally collecting the sword set, Jian Wushuang took the seat. 5 years, for him, it was not even as long as the fishing in the Yunxiao Palace. He strives to adjust the dynamism and state to the peak state in these 5 years, in order to deal with everything that happens next. The Boyang bottle was also opened, and the 3 emperors just returned to the bottle and fell asleep after wandering around in a small orphan day. Everything was spent in gentleness. Jian Wushuang did not know what was waiting for him next, and was forced to accept it. Undercurrents often seem to be calm, undercurrents surge. 5 years, but flashed away. When Jian Wushuang's has rushed out again, the Xuanhe streamer transformed from Yang Li re-emerges, and Xiao Gushan's enchantment is opened. The little emperor who had disappeared from his extravagant clothes was replaced with a kimono symbolizing the emperor. On this dark golden monastery, each stroke of the needle threading depicts mountains, rivers, and lakes, symbolizing the meaning of Bona. And on its collar, 2 dark-eared symmetrical thin-eared animals were inlaid with dark gold thread. This kimono made the little emperor lose a little bit of the charm of boys and girls, and a little more hero and martial arts, but the pale paleness on his face could not be concealed. Behind him stood nearly 1,000 figures. Little Emperor, I'm going to invite Brother Sword to come. Chen Qinggong shouted, and then suddenly stopped when he set off. You are waiting here, I can just go there. After leaving this sentence, Xiao Dijun went to the depths of Shaogushan alone. A little envy appeared in Chen Qing's eyes. Brother Sword is really awesome. I haven't seen one person with this treatment for so many years. The thin purple robe slightly raised his gaze, looked at Xiao Dijun's distant figure, and dropped his eyelids again. Seemingly, Jian Wushuang, who was sitting in Wuwu, slowly opened his eyes and saw a figure coming. Brother Jian, Gongzi Yang came to visit. Xiao Dijun smiled and stopped on the square. Spit out a muddled breath, Jian Wushuang stood up and nodded. It is considered to have seen. Looking up and down at the swordsmanship, the little emperor said with interest, How is the recovery? Not bad, when will you leave? All ready, just waiting for you. Jian Wushuang nodded, and Chuanqiu also walked out of the palace and stood behind him. When he was about to leave, Xiao Dijun suddenly stopped him, then stretched out his hand and stuffed a set of clothing to Jian Wushuang. Put it on, the group of embroidered ladies in Darciu tailored it, it's not bad. Jian Wushuang was quite helpless, and was not easy to attack, so he had to rush into the palace and change his clothes. A moment later, the sword that changed into a long suit with silver silk embroidery thread on its front appeared. Although he was extraordinary and handsome in the clothes, it made him feel uncomfortable, which was far less comfortable than the black shirt ranger. Little Emperor's eyes showed satisfaction, and then turned to open the way. Brother Jian, I don't see it. You are not much worse than the emperor. Chuanqiu looked up and down at Jian Wushuang, and envy flashed in his eyes. Don't talk nonsense, this dress doesn't suit me very well. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly, quietly loosened his belt, and then stepped forward. Chuanqiu scratched his head. It's really a bit like my emperor's figure. It's really strange. He would never have thought that this young man beside him, who was silent and quiet but seemed to have an inexhaustible story, was once a cosmic god. A total of more than 1,000 ancestor-level top repairers, 20 Yangxian, condensed in the void at this moment, the real fangs that he has been hiding have been revealed to Jian Wushuang. Outside of the Six Heavens realm, in the emptiness of Darciu, the little emperor's rare and calm gaze slowly swept over the figure standing in front of him. And at this moment, the entire Big Siu's void began to scream. A monster that Zun Wushuang had never seen stepped on the moving clouds and came by the wind. Such strange beasts, such as dragons like sheep, with curved corners and thin ears, are engraved on the body with golden scales, and they are quite mysterious while they can't tell the weirdness. A total of 20 strange beasts and 10 imperial garrisons reach. On top of each imperial dragon, there is a banner engraved with Yang characters. For a long time, the little emperor's calm but full of prestige's voice resounded throughout the entire division. Everyone, with the son of Yang, go to heaven and go to the banquet. Chapter 47:19. No one spoke, all stood. Each of them has followed the little emperor's side since his indefinite years, without having to say a word, to know its meaning. The intention to kill is skyrocketing. The thin purple robe walked out of the array, holding the palm of the little emperor, and sent him into one of the 10 imperial courts. The remaining 9 vehicles are suspect cars that serve as a deceptive role. After sending the little emperor into the imperial court, the thin purple robe turned back and looked at Jian Wushuangdao, and follow me. Jian Wushuang had no doubt about him, and after looking at each other with Chuanqiu, Chen Qing and others, he went straight to Yuyong. After being pushed into the chariot by the thin purple robe, Jian Wushuang only saw that Xiao Dijuan was also among them. He was embarrassed and had to quit. "Brother Jian, let me stay here. I let my partner let you in here." Xiao Dijun beckoned. "I'm not sure if there is any danger on this journey, so I'm going to let you go." Jian Wushuang nodded and then sat in this luxurious chariot. Chuanqiu and Chen Qing and the rest of the Yangxian all entered the other 9 imperial palaces. The remaining more than 1,000 ancestors did not follow up together, but kept up with more than 100 to act as ceremonies, and the rest were scattered throughout the entire division. With the preparation of the personnel, a total of 10 imperial dragons rose by the wind. The monsters like dragons and sheep stepped on the clouds, and every step was 100 million miles away. Although the speed is so terrible, sitting in the imperial wing is a little bit bumpy. At this moment, this is enough to accommodate dozens of people in the imperial court, only sitting Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijun. The atmosphere was awkward, and Jian Wushuang simply closed his eyes and pondered. With the clouds of smoke rising from the golden furnace, the entire Yulong has also become an excellent place for spiritual practice. "Brother Jian, it will take a few months to go. If nothing happens, just take a rest and rest," Xiao Dijuan reminded. Jian Wushuang nodded, yes. At this point, this long distance has entered a silent stage. The imperial princes who walked through the void passed through the void world and marched towards the most mysterious place. The 6 emperor realms of the little emperor are just the 6 general universes in the big domain, and beyond the scope of the big domain, the world is even more vast. The heavenly court, known as Emperor Wuyang, could not be reached. Jian Wushuang was really curious about this legendary figure who basically lived in the verbal abuse of the 3 emperors. What kind of horrible existence should be able to destroy the emperor bodies of the 3 emperors and the heavenly court with one's own strength? And the Emperor Fenghua, emperor of the spring and autumn period, also fell into the hands of Zhen Wuyang, and there are only 4 people who know the sword Wushuang alone. Perhaps this kind of emperor should know something. Jian Wushuang secretly thought about the next step in his heart, and unconsciously, it had been almost 20 days. I do not know whether it is in a dream, or when he is awake, he feels a surging crisis. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes violently, and Xiao Dijuan opened his eyes at the same time. Is this group of grotesques crazy, and dare to kill here? Really, the seat is muddy, the little emperor said coldly, even if he would step out. Jian Wushuang reached out to hold him in a timely manner, and said in a deep voice, "Don't go out first, just watch its changes." He nodded slowly, and the strength of his hands quietly surfaced. At the next moment, a surging force of extreme strength broke through the void, and burst directly in these 10 imperial dragons. Jian Wushuang only felt that the space around him suddenly swelled up, and then the imperial lord in front of him shattered. The 3 Yangxian who were sitting in the Yuqi were hit the spot. No longer able to watch its changes, Jian Wushuang rushed out of the imperial court directly, and stood in the void. Chuanqiu, Chen Qing and others quickly moved closer together. "Brother Sword, how is Xiao Dijun?" Chen Qing said with a real sword. Fine. A gloomy voice sounded, and the little emperor stepped out slowly. Jian Wushuang's eyes were slightly condensed. He felt the strong breath that came from all directions, no less than 40. In the void adorned with stars, it really encloses more than 40 yangxian. 20 to 40 is at a great disadvantage. But Chen Qing and other yangxian still surrounded the little emperors in the first time. Immediately afterwards, a faint-faced yangxian stepped forward and pointed to the little emperor. Leave him behind, I can put you on a path of life, or the offender, die. Who sent you? Gongzi Jiao, or Gongzi Yu? Xiao Emperor Shen Sheng asked. That yangxian smiled again. What is the use of the dead to know more? But you still have a way to live. As long as you return to the same path, I promise not to hurt you alone. Little Emperor sneered. Are you really so sure? Just eat me like that. Of course, as long as I think, it is impossible for all of you now to leave alive. In a word, the entire void seemed to become a quagmire, and the original vast force directly rolled towards the little emperor and others. Jian Wushuang snorted, and the invisible long sword in his hand was directly cut open and surrounded, and everything returned to its original state. Seeing this scene, Yang Xian, who was still grinning, stunned, and then said, I think you are just a group of people, but I still have some tolerance. Chen Qing heard that he immediately took a step forward and directly released the magnificent and powerful force. His realm is rising. Even Jian Wushuang feels that Chen Qing's realm seems to be far more than Yangxian. All the Yangxian who surrounded the front changed their faces, hands on, boom, boom. A total of more than 40 Yangxian fully released the terror of the extreme. The void is rapidly collapsing, and the rallying power is like shooting from a train. Chen Qing stretched out his hand, and suddenly a barrier of strength surrounded the crowd, blocking the terrifying power. Jian Wushuang no longer hesitates, directly evokes the invisible sword and moves forward. This barrier could not last long, even though Chen Qing's realm showed signs of breakthrough, but he was still Yangxian, and he could not protect himself under the siege of so many Yangxian. Therefore, Jian Wushuang took the lead to set off, killing the most immortal Yangxian in as much time as possible. 40 Yangxian were many times more in that interception in the Jingchuan Tiancheng. The little emperor's eyes are about to bleed. This time and again the interception is far beyond imagination, and there is no emotion left at all. Young master, if I live, I will kill you first. Void Tremor, led by Jian Wushuang, a total of 60 Yangxian, start fighting here. With a sword forced to retreat in front of him, Jian Wushuang directly threw out a celestial gate, so as to hit all the enemies who dare to move forward. Chapter 47:20. One Yangxian was unable to retreat, was crushed into powder by the Chuanjie Tian men on the spot, and the Xianyuan was broken. The battlefield of Jiaozhua's fight was immediately vacated, and more than a dozen Yangxian all looked at Jian Wushuang vigilantly. That kind of Zhuangqi's magical power is so vast. On the other side, Chen Qing opened a ring of killing, and each blow was enough to hit several Yangxian who dare to run forward. But Rao is so, these Yangxian under the small emperor's seat are still showing their fatigue. How can 20 be against 40? Without the help of the three emperors, Jian Wushuang stood up to several Yangxian undefeated at the most, but now he was surrounded by no less than 10. He alone attracted a quarter of the firepower, very depressed. Keep your head, obediently, I can make you suffer less. A force of vigorous force hit Sword Muzu. The sword in his hand reversed, and the sword tore the offensive. The sword smiled disdainfully, on the basis of the shameless wastes of you, can I take my head? For the first Yangxian's face, and then a move in both hands, a total of 11 Yangxian worked together, and the sky covered the sky like the power of the entire void, and the cover pressed. Jian Wushuang's eyes were dignified, when he first raised up a force to block, and then lifted the sword straight up. Absolute sword. A sword can be regarded as 100,000 sword, with a broken face. Boom. Thousands of streamers burst into flames, and Jian Wushuang, holding a long sword, moved forward. Nagdamang was split in half from the middle and was quickly dissipating. And Jian Wushuang was also extremely uncomfortable at this moment. The combined effort of these 11 Yangxian was not what he could bear. In this, The skin surface seemed to start to burn. "Brother Jian, I'll help you." With a cry, Chuanqiu manipulated his 8 arms with anger and rushed straight ahead. The 8 giant arms rang with the sword Wushuang in the cover of the sky. Jian Wushuang only felt a slack in his body, and all his strong eyes were gone. Spring and autumn came to him. Shensheng said quickly, "Brother Jian, let's retreat, 40 Yangxian, we will continue to stalemate like this, we must die 10 live." "Can't go." Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly twisted. He had his own set of life rules. If he left in this way, it would be a disaster for Chen Qing, Xiaodijun, and others. Without retreat, morale is the first thing to hit. In any case, he can't retreat today. Stretching his hands to separate the huge power from the impact again, Jian Wushuang turned back and pushed Chuanqiu into the protective circle. He is just an ancestor. Even if he has 8 arms of anger, he will directly die in Yangxian's offensive if he is a little careless. The only thing Jian Wushuang can do now is to try to protect it behind him. There are constant Yangxian decay, and the power of such existence can destroy the world between hands, not to mention that there are nearly 60 Yangxian players. The void is torn, and the planes and worlds that are slightly closer are also affected and continue to collapse. Nearly 100 ancestors were killed by the town as early as the beginning, and the immortals brought by the little emperor were also rapidly decreasing. Several people have long been the end of a strong crossbow. Even if Chen Qing has reached the peak of his strength, he is also weak in the face of so many Yangxian. A sword of Xinghe Lake and the sea emerged, reluctantly blocking the crowd of Yangxian who threw again. Jian Wushuang and others had been encircled. At this point, there were only 8 Yangxian left beside Xiaodijun. Chen Qing's right arm was scarred, especially on his right rib. The scars were shocking. These wounds caused by the same Yangxian are difficult to heal in a short time, which also means that the combat power will be reduced to a certain extent. Looking at Yangxian, who still has nearly 25 or 6, Jian Wushuang and others were all sinking into their hearts. "Little Emperor, after I leave, I will return to the 6-day realm and stop reaching the heavens." Chen Qing whispered, "Only alive can we continue to fulfill our long-cherished wish. Brother Sword, the safety of the little emperor will please you." He looked at Jian Wushuang. The Sword Emperor hadn't even spoken yet. The little emperor said coldly, "Chen Qing, when do you need to decide this matter?" Chen Qing was anxious. "But if you don't leave the little emperor, you can't go away. As a successor emperor, I have to go to the heavenly court. Even if I die on the road, I can't change it." Xiao Emperor's voice was indifferent, and his eyes were dead. "Oh, the successor emperor, a waste that can only be cultivated, but can't be enlightened, dare to call the successor emperor?" The first one was a soft-looking Yangxian who disdainfully sneered, and more than 20 Yangxian behind him also laughed at the moment. "Stand up. Master, just give it to me." The thin purple robe lowered his head slightly, and was taken by the little emperor while taking a step. Just let the waste in his mouth send him on the road. His voice was indifferent, but he swept up with a deep dignity. The next moment, fight again. A field filled with dark colors sprang up, and the little emperor was in it, as if to become the emperor who truly controlled the party. "Destroy the master Yang Yang, reward." Instead of being afraid, the soft-looking Yangxian didn't be afraid, but instead smiled with a ghostly figure, and rushed directly to the little emperor. One sword pierced one of Yangxian's peeper bones, Jian Wushuang sank with a sigh, and Qi Tianyan's force slammed forward. Tianmen's terrible power of terror came again. However, all the terrifying Yangxian who had already been taught, all stopped together, and under the full blow of Jian Wushuang, there was no casualties. Jian Wushuang's heart sank fiercely, but he immediately raised his invisible sword and rushed forward. Various supernatural powers blasted on him, even the indelible body began to be injured. The little emperor released the realm, and with one blow, he destroyed a Yangxian, but then was blocked by the rest of Yangxian. Chen Qing and others also managed to protect themselves. A shocking wound began to appear on everyone just as this fierce battle was about to be completely besieged by Jian Wushuang and others. From the boundless void, there was a sudden burst of sky. Jian Wushuang almost subconsciously grabbed the little emperor in front of him, then slammed back. Zheng. A horror that easily breaks the void cuts through the sky, as if the sky and the sky are open, Hundreds of thousands of miles of the void are splitting the void like a deep prison under this blow. Almost at the same time of retreating, that I don't know where it came from, but with a direct cut of destruction, he came to crush the sky. There are more than a dozen Yangxian who have no time to dodge, and immediately the figure becomes powder, and the fairy source turns into nothingness. This dreadful and terrifying sword directly plowed the void into a gullies of nothingness. Dead silence, the extreme dead silence, all the surviving Yangxian froze at this moment. Chapter 47:21. With a sword of hundreds of millions of miles, the power of Huang Huang poured out. It is impossible for anyone other than Yangxian to be able to cause damage to either side of the world in this great Yanhuan. Even Jian Wushuang, when destroying Jingchuan in the beginning, could only use the power of the three emperors to destroy it. This shows the difficulty. What kind of existence is this sword capable of extinguishing hundreds of millions of voids? A bunch of guys who don't know the sky and the ground, do you know to protect the environment? A very impatient voice resounded in the void. Jian Wushuang gazed at the source of the sound, and saw a hazy figure standing far away. Even if it was so far away, he could feel the pressure of a transcendental cognition. However, this figure glowing dimly only appeared for a moment, and then disappeared directly. This is just a warning. If you dare to destroy anything and treat everything as nothing, then all will disappear. The sound of prestige rang through the void, and it took a long time to disappear. Such a terrible sword, such a mysterious figure, were just shocked and eventually disappeared. Looking at this sword mark that ripped through the void of hundreds of millions of miles, all Yangxian twitched at the corners of their mouths, which was too domineering. This sword of indiscriminate attack directly beheaded nearly 20 Yangxian. If it wasn't for the sword Wushuang's great attack, he would hold back the little emperor and retreat. Recovering from the shock, looking at the dozen or so Yangxian left in front of him, Jian Wushuang's mouth sneered a sneer. It was originally a one-sided suppression situation. Under the sword of the mysterious man, it was directly reversed. With the addition of Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan still has 6 Yangxian, a ancestor level left, and only 12 Yangxian left. He and Chen Qing alone can hardly resist the 12 Yangxian, not to mention the help of Xiao Dijun and the thin purple robe. The Yinru Yangxian, who had no heart to fight anymore, shouted for a quick retreat after trembling, and he fled regardless of his preparation. A very dark vine, as if growing from nothingness, quietly clinging to him with a rich death. The void around him seemed to stagnate, and even the strength of the body was stiff. The great terror between life and death made this feminine Yangxian horrified. Come on, save me. But the rest of the Yangxian who fled in vain, no one looked at him, all scattered in the void, disappeared. What awaits him is an extremely horrifying god of extreme horror. Yinru Yangxian turned back hard, and couldn't even speak. Open your mouth and stick your tongue out. The little emperor looked somber, holding a real sword. He heard the words, boarded in his heart and rejoiced. His tongue was cut, and it can grow up to thousands of years, at least one life can be left. Immediately, this Yinru Yangxian sticks out her tongue, confusingly said, "More, thank you little emperor." The blade was cut across, and a tongue was cut off directly. He groaned, the blood spewed in his mouth. Before he closed his mouth, another sword directly pierced his face, and the terrifying diffusivity emerged from the blade of the sword, and the whole head and the fairy source were crushed. Jian Wushuang stepped back half a step, frowning slightly. This little emperor's heart is too heavy, so it can be seen. Without the head and the immortal source of immortality, the fairy fell silently into the void of the void. Throughout the void, only a few fragments of Yangxian's remains remained floating silently. When the real sword entered the sheath, the little emperor slowly turned around, raised his eyebrows and glanced at Jian Wushuang. Then he passed out directly. The thin purple robe seemed to have been expected, hugged the little emperor, and ran straight to the unbroken imperial dragon. Chen Qing smiled bitterly. The old problem has been committed again. Without any meaningless questioning, Jian Wushuang rushed to the other imperial princes with Chuanqiu. In this fierce battle, there were only 3 barely usable 10 of the 10 imperial battleships, but they were small ear-like beasts like dragons and sheep, with few casualties. Chen Qing was lagging behind after waving his gloves, and then left to move on. Halfway through the interception, there were only 6 people left, which is not terrible. If the mysterious man didn't cross his hand, I'm afraid that today would be another 9-death situation. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang was a little puzzled. How did he live to the present under the interception of layers? Only Yuchen was traveling when Yuyong moved forward, sitting with Jian Wushuang. I said, Brother Jian, is there any hidden illness in Gongziyang? Did you see it just now? This is the 2nd time. Chuanqiu whispered. Jian Wushuang thought for a moment, and then said, do not rule out this possibility. According to these 3 and 5 interceptions, it is already a miracle to survive. Chuanqiu heard the words and held his forehead with his hands. I really can't believe it. I, who wanted to put him to death, stood on the same line with him at the moment. Jian Wushuang smiled, when the time is right, let's not leave too late. It can only be like this. Chuanqiu nodded helplessly, and then whispered, however, we know that he has a dark disease and it's easy to deal with. If one day he really wants to tear his face, he can also be hit hard. He shook his head and stopped talking. There was only a faint roar of wind blowing in his ears. It was a journey of more than 20 days in a row, and there was no accident in the following journey. The void that appears nothingness around is gradually being replaced by the sky filled with vast power on one side. It is so rich that it becomes solid, and the breath of life is in the void. Colorful shadows span across the heavens and set up on this side of the heaven. Walking through this place makes people feel dreamy and relaxed. Waving his hand to open the curtain in front of the window, after seeing this scene, Rao Shijian Wushuang all sighed. The Ninefang Super Celestial Realm is in the form of a portal, setting off the center of the more vast heavenly court like the Arch of the Stars. Next, the unspeakable grand mystery. Brother Jian, this should be the heaven of the real Wuyang. Chuanqiu looked solemn. Immediately afterwards, there was an uneasy restlessness in the bottle-yang bottle. The stopper of the bottle was gently opened, and the voice of the 3 emperors rang loudly. What happened to Xiaoyu? How do I feel something is wrong here? Why is this breath so familiar? It makes me inexplicably irritable. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly and whispered, 3 seniors, we should now enter the real court of Zhenwuyang. What? Xiaoyu, do you want to go straight to Zhenwuyang Laowo? The true shadow of this emperor hasn't been restored. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.